The night the skies of the imperial capital bled crimson, the northernmost corner of the forbidden city remained entirely dark. The lung of the cold palace was not a grand hall, but a sprawling corpse of rotting cedar and cracked gray stone. It was the place where the emperor sent the women he wished to forget without wasting the silk rope to hang them. Here the weeds grew waist-high through the flagstones, and the wind off the northern steps howled through windows missing their paper screens, sounding like the weeping of 1,000 abandoned wives. In the deepest room of the eastern wing, Lady Meng sat on the edge of a bare brick con bed. Once, she had been a favored consort, celebrated for her mastery of the 7-stringed guqin. Now, her hands were rough and calloused, her fine silk robes long ago traded to corrupt eunuchs for sacks of moldy grain. She was 24, but her eyes held the heavy, dead stillness of a deep well. A sudden, violent crash shattered the silence of the courtyard. Meng did not flinch. She simply slipped a rusted iron shearing tool into the wide sleeve of her tattered robe and rose, her movements fluid and silent. Through the splintered doorway, a shadow staggered into the room. It was Eunuch Gao, a servant from the inner palace, his robes drenched in rain and dark, heavy blood. Clutching his abdomen, he collapsed against the rotting pillar, his breath rattling in his throat. Lady Meng, Gao gasped, his eyes wild with terror. The noble consort, the Empress's men. None survived. Meng looked at him coldly. She knew the politics of the outer court had grown rotten. It was only a matter of time before the harem became a slaughterhouse. If you have come here to die, Gao, do it in the courtyard. The crows will clean the floor. I will not. Not for me, the dying eunuch wheezed. With trembling, bloody hands, he peeled back the layers of his heavy outer cloak. Nestled against his chest was a bundle of heavy, embroidered imperial silk, a stark, blinding contrast to the filth of the cold palace. Inside the silk lay a newborn infant, his eyes wide and dark, shockingly silent, as if he already understood that a single cry in this place meant death. The late consort's only son, Gao whispered, his strength failing as he pressed the bundle toward her. The Empress believes he perished in the fire. They will never look for a living prince among the dead. Hide him, please. With a final, choking breath, Gao's hand dropped. His eyes went blank, staring up at the leaking roof. Meng stood frozen. The silence returned, heavy and suffocating, broken only by the steady drip of rainwater onto the floorboards. She looked from the dead servant to the silk bundle. "A liability," she whispered to the empty room, her voice sharp as glass. "A target. You foolish child, walking into a grave before you have even learned to speak." She turned her back on the infant, returning to her cold bed. Let the cold take him, she told herself. I can barely keep my own heart beating. I cannot save a ghost. An hour passed. The storm outside intensified, throwing freezing sleet through the broken window. From the corner, a tiny, fragile sound broke the dark. It wasn't a loud cry, the boy was too weak for that, but a soft, shivering whimper. Meng shut her eyes tightly. She gripped her arms, fighting the phantom ache of a life she had buried years ago. For 3 long minutes, she fought herself. Then, with a bitter curse that withered on her lips, she rose. She walked over, picked up the bundle, and stripped away the dangerous, gilded imperial silk, tossing it into the dying embers of her small brazier. Wrapping the infant in her own coarse, faded cotton inner robe, she brought him to the khan. She pressed his tiny, freezing body against her own chest, using her bare skin to fight back the winter. "Listen to me, little ghost," she murmured into his sparse black hair, her voice devoid of softness but fierce with survival. "There are no princes here. There is no court. If you wish to live, you will learn to be silent. You will learn to eat dirt, and you will never, ever let them see your tears." Against her chest, the newborn boy stopped shivering, his tiny hand clenching the rough fabric of her collar. 5 years passed like a slow, recurring fever. The boy was named Lin, meaning forest, a common, unremarkable name that gave no hint of the imperial blood in his veins. To the low-ranking eunuchs who occasionally tossed baskets of stale manta buns through the cracked gates, he was merely the bastard spawn of a forgotten madwoman. Lin did not grow up like the princes of the inner palace. He did not wear yellow satin, he did not ride purebred horses, and he did not have a dozen tutors bowing to his brilliance. His palace was a courtyard of broken tiles. His toys were smooth river stones and dried cicada shells. "Anyang," Lin whispered one autumn afternoon, sitting cross-legged on the dirt floor. He was 5 now, small for his age, with sharp, observant eyes that mirrored Meng's own. He pointed to a line of black ants marching across a split in the stone. "Why do they carry the dead one?" Meng sat beside him, a piece of charcoal held between her slender fingers. She did not soften the world for him. She never had, because in the colony the useless are discarded, and the dead are food or debris, Meng said calmly, her voice echoing the harsh reality of their existence. "The world outside these walls is no different, Lin. The powerful devour the weak, and the careless are trampled." She brought the charcoal down, drawing a massive, intricate grid on the dirt floor. It was a map of the imperial court, memorized from her days of glory and betrayal. "This is the chessboard," she said, tapping a square. "The Grand Secretary sits here. He appears righteous, but he is a coward who sways with the wind. The noble consort sits here. She relies on her family's control of the northern iron mines. How do you defeat a mountain made of iron, Lin?" Lin looked at the dirt, his small brow furrowed in deep thought. He didn't answer with a boy's boast of swords or armies. He had watched his mother bribe a greedy guard with nothing more than a carefully chosen word and a broken silver hairpin. "You don't fight the mountain," Lin said softly, his voice clear. "You cut the road that carries the food to the miners. When they starve, the mountain crumbles." A rare, fleeting shadow of a smile touched Meng's lips. She reached out, her rough palm brushing his cheek. It was a slow, deliberate gesture of love, one she rarely allowed herself, but when she did, it anchored the boy completely. "Good," she murmured. "Tomorrow, we learn the lineages of the southern clans. You must know their ancestors better than they know their own children. Knowledge is the only blade they cannot confiscate from us." By the time Lin turned 12, the boy had become a creature of the dark. He was thin but wiry, his movements completely devoid of sound. The cold palace had taught him that the world was divided into schedules, blind spots, and the creaking of old wood. He knew exactly which floorboards in the eastern corridor groaned under weight. And he knew the precise hour the night guards grew drowsy from their warm wine. By 14, the high walls were no longer an impassable barrier. Lin discovered a collapsed drainage grate near the northern wall where the iron bars had rusted through from the kitchen runoff. With careful, silent work, he widened the gap enough to slip through, beginning his double life. By day, he was a ragged ghost sweeping dead leaves. By night, a shadow slipping through the bustling, dangerous alleys of the capital. He started at the absolute bottom of the capital's underworld, using his mother's psychological insights to build a network of street orphans, informants, and broken outcasts. It was during one of those midnight excursions that he met Master Shen, a former imperial commander forced into hiding by the corrupt faction that had slaughtered Lin's biological mother. Shen was a man of fierce righteousness and deep tactical brilliance. Seeing the royal spark and untamed potential in the boy's eyes, Shen took him under his wing. For years, Shen trained him in martial arts, logistics, and statecraft, refining his raw survival instincts into true, disciplined statesmanship. But more than a teacher, Shen became a protector. The day came when Lin trusted Shen enough to bring him through the secret passage into the cold palace. Meeting the mother changed everything. In the dim light of a flickering tallow candle, Shen did not see a discarded, broken concubine. He saw a woman of unmatched resilience and razor-sharp intellect. And she saw a man who treated her son not as a political tool, but as a boy worthy of a future. Over the years, as Lin grew taller, broader, and more formidable, a profound, quiet romance blossomed between the two adults. They spoke in whispers over maps drawn in the dirt, their hands occasionally brushing, finding an anchor in each other amidst the surrounding peril. They became a family of three, bound not by blood, but by a shared promise of justice. By the time Lin turned 20, the cold palace had transformed from a prison into a hidden war room. The watery congee of his childhood was long gone, secretly replaced by nourishing food smuggled in by Shen's network. Elite shadow guards, fiercely loyal to the prince, permanently stationed themselves in the dilapidated rafters of the courtyard, ensuring no rogue eunuch or abusive guard could ever step foot near his mother again. The cold palace, meant to be a curse, had become their greatest blessing, a perfect blind spot hiding a growing revolution. One rainy autumn evening, the family of three gathered around a heavy wooden table, a recent, secret addition to their room. The mother placed a smooth river stone onto a map of the imperial court. The Grand Secretary is the emperor's right hand, but he is bleeding the treasury dry through the southern grain taxes. Do not strike him directly, my son. Deliver the tax ledgers to the righteous ministry. Let the honest men of the court become your vanguard. Shen nodded, placing his hand over hers in a steadying gesture. Your mother is right. I have quietly rallied the retired generals and the border guards who are weary of the emperor's tyranny. They do not want a bloody coup. They want a restoration of the empire's honor. When you strike, you will walk in not as a rebel, but as a savior. Lin watched them, the steady warmth between his mother and the man who had become a father to him. The rage that had fueled his youth had matured into a cold, calculated focus. The trap is fully laid, Lin said, his voice deep and commanding. They think we are rotting in the dark. They have no idea the dark has teeth. The rebellion was not a chaotic slaughter, but a swift, surgical strike that paralyzed the corrupt regime overnight. Backed by Shen's hidden military factions and a coalition of righteous ministers who had long prayed for deliverance, Lin seized the throne with minimal bloodshed. The corrupt, unloyal ministers were arrested, tried for treason, and stripped of their ill-gotten wealth. The tyrannical emperor faced his forgotten son in the grand hall before meeting his definitive end. When the dust settled, the grand throne room of the Tay Hall became a canyon of shimmering gold and polished white jade. Emperor Lin sat upon the dragon throne, the heavy imperial crown resting upon his brow, its 12 jade tassels swinging slightly with every movement of his head. He was 24 now, a monarch of terrifying composure. His eyes swept over the kneeling assembly of civil and military officials. Rise! Lin's voice rang through the hall. As the officials stood, their hands tucked neatly into their silk sleeves, a tense silence gripped the court. Guided by the meticulous records his mother had kept, he elevated honest, low-ranking scholars to key ministries. Prime Minister Shen stepped forward, bowing with fierce pride. Your Majesty, the reorganization of the southern granaries is complete. The relief grain has reached the flood victims. The people are singing praises to the heavens for your justice. Let them praise the harvest, Prime Minister, not me, Lin said calmly. What of the inner palace? The imperial edict has been executed, Shen replied. 300 consorts and maids of the previous harem have been granted their freedom, complete with a dowry from the treasury to secure their futures. And the former empress and her primary conspirators have been stripped of their silk robes and relocated to the northern wing. The Lungong? Lin closed his eyes for a brief second. The poetic justice was absolute. The very walls that had been meant to starve him to death would now house the women who had ordered his biological mother's execution. The court factions were desperate to marry their daughters to the new sovereign. But Lin refused them all, knowing they were raised to be extensions of their father's ambitions. It was during his mid-autumn inspection of the southern river dikes that he found his true match. In a flood-ravaged province, Lin walked through a refugee camp dressed in the simple, indigo robes of a traveling scholar. Expecting to find chaos, he instead found absolute order, managed by a young woman sitting on a simple wooden crate. She wore a plain gray cotton linen tunic, her face smudged with soot, but her eyes were bright and entirely focused on a ledger. A local official, recognizing the emperor's entourage despite their disguise, rushed forward to scold her. "Audacious girl, move your crate out of the way. Important guests have arrived." The girl did not flinch. She slowly laid her bamboo brush across the inkstone, looked up, and locked her gaze with Lin. "If the guests are important, they can wait 5 minutes while I finish feeding the people who built the road they rode on," she said calmly. The living cannot eat prestige. In Suyun, Lin did not see a court ornament. He'd see a mirror. She possessed the same fierce, practical resilience that had kept his mother alive, combined with an unyielding sense of justice. 3 months later, Suyun entered the imperial capital. On the day of their grand wedding, she wore the traditional scarlet robes of an empress, but beneath the heavy phoenix crown, her eyes remained as clear and grounded as they had been in the muddy camps of the south. Months after the coronation, the palace was peaceful. In a private courtyard outside the main halls, Lady Meng sat on a stone bench beneath the shade of an ancient plum blossom tree. At 48, her silver-threaded hair was styled elegantly, and her face, once hollow with hunger, was full and serene. Beside her stood Master Shen, wearing the simple robes of a retired general, his hand placed openly over hers on the stone table with a tenderness that had only deepened with the passing of years. The wooden gate creaked open, and Lin stepped into the courtyard, followed by Suyun. "Anyang," Lin said, the terrifying emperor instantly vanishing, replaced by the boy who had shared a single stale man too. He walked over and bowed deeply out of absolute filial devotion. Meng rose, a warm, radiant smile transforming her face. She pulled him into a tight embrace before turning to pull Suyun into her side. "You look tired, my son," Meng murmured. "The Ministry of Rites is insisting we spend 50,000 taels on a summer pavilion," Suyun answered with a wry smile. "Lin and I told them that if they want a pavilion, they can carry the stones from the quarry themselves." Shen chuckled, pouring a cup of hot chrysanthemum tea and pushing it toward Lin. "Good. Keep them lean, Your Majesty. A fat court makes for a starving populace." Lin sat down beside his adoptive father. He looked around the peaceful garden, at the soft warmth between Meng and Shen, at the sharp, supportive intelligence in Suyung's eyes. The cold palace was a distant memory. "We are safe, Lin," Meng said softly, squeezing his hand. "The ghosts are gone. You have given us all a home." Lin squeezed her hand back. "No, Onyang," he whispered. "You gave me a life. I merely built the walls to protect it." Decades passed like the turning of pages in a great historical chronicle. The empire enjoyed an era of unprecedented peace and prosperity, until the water clock in the ancestral hall ticked with a heavy, rhythmic finality on the day of the autumn solstice. Emperor Lin stood before the towering spiritual tablets of his ancestors. He was 74 years old now, his hair a striking, dignified silver beneath the heavy jade tassels of the imperial crown. Beside him stood Empress Suyun, a steady anchor as she had been for 50 years. Behind them knelt their eldest son, Crown Prince Xian, a young man of 30 who possessed his mother's sharp intellect and the steady, disciplined martial bearing of Master Shen's teachings. Len turned slowly. "Xian." Len's voice was raspy with age, yet it carried absolute authority. Look upon this hall. Look upon the gold, the jade, and the silk. Tell me what you see. Xian kept his head lowered. I see the glory of the great Lin dynasty, imperial father. I see the heart of the realm. No, Lin said softly, stepping down from the altar platform and gently lifting his son's chin so their eyes met. You see a debt? Every stone of this palace was paid for by the sweat of a farmer who will never walk through its gates. The moment you believe this throne is a privilege rather than a burden, you have already become a tyrant. Lin reached up and slowly removed the heavy imperial crown from his own head. With steady hands, he placed it onto the silk cushion held by the Prime Minister. The dockets are signed. The treasury is full. The borders are secure, Lin murmured, a profound sense of lightness washing over his chest. Your mother and I have finished our watch. Rule with a cold mind, my son, but keep your heart warm for the people. Zhan bowed until his forehead touched the polished white jade floor. Long live the Emperor. May your retirement be filled with the peace you gave to the world. The next morning, before the sun could burn the mist off the capital's rooftops, a single, unadorned carriage slipped out of the northern gates. Inside the carriage, Lin sat in a simple cotton robe, his shoulders relaxed in a way they had never been while wearing gold. He looked out the window watching the massive crimson walls of the Forbidden City slowly shrink into the distance. Su-yun sat across from him, her fingers busily peeling a fresh winter pear. She handed half of it to him, her eyes crinkling with a quiet, knowing smile. How does it feel? She asked softly. To be a ghost again. Lin took the pear, breaking it in half. He looked at the larger piece, then pushed it back into her hand. It feels like breathing, Lin whispered. For 50 years I belonged to the Empire. Today, I only belong to you. The carriage traveled deep into the countryside, entering a quiet, mist-shrouded valley at the foot of the northern mountains. This land was pristine, untouched by courtly whispers, surrounded by bamboo groves and wild plum trees. The very piece of land Lin had secretly purchased when he was still a teenager, using the first black market silver coins he had earned as a boy. The carriage came to a halt near a flowing crystalline stream. Lin stepped down, breathing in the crisp, cool air of the mountains. He turned and extended his hand to Su-yun, helping her down onto the grass. Together, hand in hand, the elderly couple walked toward a gentle knoll at the back of the garden. Standing beneath the shade of a massive, ancient plum blossom tree were two quiet, moss-covered stone tablets. Lin knelt before them, his movements slow, but full of deep, trembling reverence. He swept away a handful of fallen autumn leaves from the inscriptions. Lady Meng and Master Shen had lived out their long lives on this very estate, entirely safe, deeply in love, and free from the shadows of their youth. They had passed away peacefully within a year of each other, their hands intertwined until the very end. Anyang, Master Shen, Lin whispered, his voice thick with a lifetime of gratitude. The child you saved from the frost has returned. The debt is paid. The empire is safe. Su-yun knelt beside him, placing a small basket of fresh winter pears and a flask of fine wine between the graves, an offering to the parents who had forged the man she loved. They know Lin, she said gently, wrapping her arm around his waist. They have always known. The old king rested his head against his wife's shoulder, watching the amber light of the setting sun paint the valley in shades of gold and violet. A cool evening breeze swept through the bamboo, shaking a shower of pale petals from the plum tree down upon them. He closed his eyes, listening to the peaceful rush of the stream. The crown was gone, the shadows were dead, and the boy from the cold palace was finally, entirely, wrapped in unbroken peace. That's it for today's video. Thanks for tuning in. Smash that like, drop a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more awesome content coming your way.